A romance anime with a love triangle set in high school. It's a setup that's almost as uninspired as the name, and yet this name conjures up such a reaction from those who've seen it. It's amazing, shockingly psychological, and inundated in subtlety. A masterpiece of a critique of high school romance anime and the entire harem genre. It's garbage. Quite possibly the worst anime ever made. It is a complete waste of time that is equal parts infuriating and boring. These are the two ways people describe the anime we're talking about this go around. School Days. Makoto is a sensitive young man attending Japanese high school high who falls for Katsura, a beautiful maiden with a shy personality and massive rack. Makoto's classmate Sekai helps him hit it off with the object of his affection, but then she does this. Yeah, it turns out Sekai has feelings for Makoto, who of course has feelings for Katsura, but also has feelings for Sekai too. It's another classic complicated love triangle where no one can seem to communicate their true feelings. But what separates this high school romance anime from all of the rest is that this time, the protagonist isn't just an everyman, someone anyone could map themselves onto to self-insert into the show. No, this time, he is an utterly unsympathetic, annoying little scumbag who borders on the sociopathic and considers every hole a goal. He is quite possibly the worst main character of all time. A serial cheater who avoids taking responsibility for his actions at every turn by gasping and stuttering and screwing. I hate this man with a passion. I want very bad things to happen to him. He is insufferable. And that was by design. You see, Makoto was meant to shine a light on the true nature of harem anime. What would actually happen if you took a bunch of emotionally charged, hormone-riddled teenagers and put them in a harem setting, full of romantic misunderstandings caused by a passive protagonist? Would it really be as comedic and goofy as most harem anime tend to be? School Days says no. But does that mean School Days is a realistic representation of high school romance? Are you asking me if the show where the main guy gets a girlfriend and then has sex with the girl he sits next to and her best friend and her other friend that's into his best friend and his childhood friend and 3 of her friends at the same time is a realistic representation of high school romance? Because no, it is not. But it's also not really a romance anime, and that might be why so many people hate School Days. Because if you look at it like a typical romance anime, then it's just a painfully generic slogfest with gratuitous fan service, illogical character writing, and a finale chock full of shock value. But if you go into it with your media literacy cap on, then you'll understand it's a satire, or a thought experiment, a character study? What are we going with? A Shakespearean tragedy. That's what School Days is. A story about a man so taken by lust that he simply cannot help himself from fornicating with any woman who says more than 3 words to him. He recognizes his own fallen nature, but he can't stop his descent into further depravity. It spirals out of control, compounding and growing exponentially until he transforms into a creature which scarcely resembles the man he thought himself to be, the man he truly used to be. And all around him are enablers who always make excuses for his poor judgment and heinous actions. It started small, just a simple failure to communicate. He had finally gotten to date an absolute cutie patootie, but he quickly realized this shy, cloistered princess wasn't everything he thought she'd be. They didn't have the same taste, they barely shared anything in common. They couldn't carry a conversation alone together for more than 2 minutes, and they each had very different boundaries when it came to relationships. Katsura had never interacted with anyone before, not in a meaningful way, which is why she was afraid of intimacy and wanted to take things very, very slow. But Makoto was a sensitive young man, awkward and unsure of himself, and really horny. Like, he looks at porn on their first date. That was probably a red flag. She should have kicked this guy to the curb then and there, but she doesn't. Because if she did, then there'd be no show. And this is the biggest problem with School Days. Things just happen because they have to happen, even though they really shouldn't happen. It's like every character is trying to be an idiot and intentionally doing things that will create the most drama possible. There are so many different points in the show where the main conflict of the story can easily be settled with a single sentence, but it just doesn't happen.
誠って西園寺と付き合ってんじゃなかったっけ？俺の勘違い？
世界と付き合ってるんでしょ今。
何？
誠くんの彼女は私ですから勘違いをしないでください。
お前桂さんとまだ付き合ってるって本当か？
そう。じゃあ伊藤は世界を選ぶんだよね。
I have just summarized the first 11 episodes, but I did skip all the sex scenes because this is a Christian anime channel. Now, people will try to convince you that there's some deeper meaning to all the characters' actions and that everything is adequately explained if you just bother to pay attention. They are wrong. Or they're intentionally misunderstanding why people don't like the characters in this show. It's not because they're unlikable or have flaws or even make mistakes. It's because the characters make no sense. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Setsuna is Sekai's best friend. Setsuna knows Sekai likes Makoto, which is why Setsuna wants Sekai to get with Makoto and for Makoto to make her happy. However, Setsuna also likes Makoto because he talked to her for about 2 minutes once and got some of his classmates to stop picking on her for being short. But because she's leaving for France before the end of the semester, she doesn't pursue her feelings. Instead, she decides to use her remaining time in Japan to make sure her best friend gets her happy ending, which is why she's so invested in Makoto cutting all ties with Katsura and declaring his undying devotion to Sekai. That makes sense. And while you might say she's dumb for thinking that Makoto will be good to Sekai when their relationship only started because he cheated on his girlfriend with her, you could just as easily say that what Makoto and Katsura had was hardly a relationship to begin with. And Setsuna herself saw firsthand just how good of a guy Makoto is. But now it doesn't make sense for her to, later on, not tell her best friend that Makoto cheated on her with someone completely new? Those defenses I just mentioned, they don't apply anymore. He's clearly not a good guy, and Setsuna should clearly realize that because she saw it firsthand after she told him to take care of Sekai. And when she confronted him about it, his immediate response was,
清浦には関係ないだろ。
and
世界のこと嫌いになったわけじゃなくて、あれはなんというか。
And when she tells him to break up with this new girl, his response is just... Now, what do you think Setsuna will do next? Will she A, demand that he tell Sekai what he's done? B, demand he break up with Sekai, or she will tell her about his infidelity? Or C, tell him that she's done helping him out and she will tell Sekai the truth about him? That's right, she sleeps with him.
ちゃんと約束してくれるなら何をしてもいいから何でも。
What? This might seem illogical at first, but it makes perfect sense once you realize that the story would rather make a point than a character with an IQ above room temperature. Yes, they are high schoolers. Yes, high schoolers are pretty dumb. And yes, high schoolers are certainly capable of doing some pretty awful things. But that doesn't make the drama and the relationships in this show feel real. It still feels forced. And it feels forced because the show is telling you one thing and showing you something else. It tells you that Makoto is quite the catch. He's able to get with just about any girl he wants to before the final episode. He even has a foursome with some girls he's never even talked to prior. But the Makoto that you see is just terrible. He isn't charming. He isn't funny. He's boring and generic. You can try to rationalize why these girls would fall for a guy like him by pulling from the real world, but you will never explain why they fall for him specifically, why they continue to like him specifically. Could you even tell me who he is specifically? Because besides being horny and bad at communicating, the man has no personality. This is why people hate Makoto. It's not because he does bad things. People love villains, especially when they're well written. No, they don't like him because he is nothing but insufferable. and because the people who defend how he and all the other poorly written characters are written say stuff like, well, now to be fair, you have to have a pretty high IQ to understand School Days. The writing is extremely subtle, and without a solid grasp of the art of subversion, most of the narrative will go over a typical viewer's head. There's also Makoto's flawed outlook, which is deftly woven into his characterization. His personal philosophy draws heavily from eroge and harem anime, for instance. The fans understand this stuff. They have the intellectual capacity to truly appreciate the depths of this satire, to realize that it's not just satire, it's also a clever deconstruction and stunning tragedy of a somewhat comical nature. I'm not doing the rest of the bit, you get the idea. The truth is, this show is a dumpster fire. It is a 14-year-old's idea of a tragic love story. People want to pretend like it's deep, but it's not. It's just dumb. And it's not even that different from other harem romance anime. It's just different in the same ways. The genre is so saturated and formulaic that many titles try to separate themselves from the competition by employing a certain gimmick. You know, this one has monster girls, and this one has angels and demons, and this one is actually good. School Days is no different. It's just another harem romance anime, but this time there's tons of sex and a moderate amount of gore. That might make it sound like it's different, but really, it's not. It's the same atrocious writing and manufactured melodrama. It does not have anything meaningful to say because it is not a serious story. They snuck in a panty shot when the main character gets stabbed to death. Why? Because they couldn't help themselves. Because that is what this show is. Softcore smut with tons of crazy people and gore. That's it. It's why the only thing that people even remember about this show is the ending. School Days is the definition of trash. But one man's trash is another man's treasure. And I'm here to say this loud and clear, this show is my treasure. And not because it's some well-executed subversion of a genre I don't even particularly care for. You see, I don't have to cry satire or cope about subversion like you. I can just enjoy trash for being trash. I like School Days because it has one of the most cathartic conclusions of all time. Probably for the wrong reasons, it's supposed to be tragic after all, but the only tears I cried were tears of joy. This scumbag finally got what he deserved, and man did it feel good to see. Speaking of stuff that's satisfying, this video is sponsored by Sakurako and Tokyo Treat. Tokyo Treat is a fun and exclusive Japanese snack box containing all different types of unique full-size snacks. It's an easy way to get a little taste of Japan without having to actually go to Japan, or outside in general, because they ship it straight to your door. Now, what's in each box depends on the theme, which changes every month. This is the box for next month, so you're getting a sneak peek for what's coming in November. And the theme is Osaka Snackathon. Osaka is a food lover's paradise, a city known for its lively streets and mouth-watering eats. Many of the city's iconic flavors have been included in the lineup of sweet and savory snacks found in this box. Immediately, I had to see what the Kit Kat flavor was this time. Each box always has a special Japanese exclusive Kit Kat, and it's pretty much always the highlight for me. This time, like all the other times, I was not disappointed. It's Mount Blanc, white chocolate with a little chestnut, very cool. I had some of the cola mochi too. Now, apparently you're supposed to use a toothpick to stack them up first. I did not do that. Sometimes these boxes come with a soda, and this is one such box. It's plum soda, and it's quite refreshing. Other items in this box include salsa sauce katsu bites, ponsuke nori and salt snacks, koikeya wasabi seaweed chips, squid and pickled ginger tempura chips, pull-apart sea animal gummies, and some kitsune udon. That's not everything, of course, but if you want to know the rest of the treats, then give me money. Now, it's not just snacks and candy and a drink that you get. There's also a booklet, which has all the descriptions of the various food items, along with some cultural insight on stuff related to the theme of the month. Since this one has to do with Osaka, there's a lot of stuff about Osaka. From castles to shops to that one girl from that one anime. So get a box for yourself or as a gift for someone special. You can sign up for a subscription by clicking the link in the description below and using my code. This does help the channel out, and I wouldn't have taken this sponsorship if I didn't actually like these snack boxes. And now back to the video. This is not a joke, by the way. I actually enjoyed watching this train wreck, and I would encourage others to check it out too if they haven't already. And that's weird for me to say because I don't like Elfen Lied or Blood Sea, two shows that are pretty similar to School Days, or at least the way people discuss and defend them is similar. And I think the reason for that is because of how this show is structured. It starts out like a typical love triangle high school romance story with a slow burn of melodrama, but then halfway through it gets exponentially more trashy with each episode that builds to an absolute dumpster fire of a finale. It's like being stuck in traffic for 2 hours and then passing a horrific 18-car pileup on the highway. You know you shouldn't be looking, but your morbid sense of curiosity won't let you avert your gaze. But I will say those early episodes were pretty dull. So dull that I probably would have dropped the show if I didn't know about the ending. The only reason I was able to get through these early episodes was because I knew this guy died in the end, but I didn't know who did it, why they did it, or if they did in anyone else. That made the early section of School Days so much more interesting because I'd be sitting there studying every character's movement, searching for a motive, trying to figure out the answers to those questions. For a good chunk of this show, I actually thought Setsuna was gonna kill Makoto in the finale. She was always silently staring at him in the early episodes. It was kind of creepy. Plus she's got red eyes and black hair. Pretty edgy, don't you think? And then you find out she's the one girl's best friend and how she desperately wants her to be happy, and then she leaves Japan after Makoto promises not to cheat on Sekai anymore, only for him to immediately cheat on her more with one of her other friends and then have a foursome and then get Sekai pregnant and then pressure her into getting an abortion. And I really thought that in the final episode, Sekai would take her own life because of how terribly Makoto was treating her, and Setsuna would find out about that and fly back to Japan to kill Makoto for ruining her best friend's life. And then maybe she'd go on a murder spree and kill anyone else Makoto was involved with too. I was so hyped to see that play out, but man did I misread the situation. There was also a point where I thought Katsura was gonna kill Makoto. She had plenty of motive with how terribly he treated her, and she becomes more and more crazed and despondent with each episode. There was even a point where she did some knitting, undoing the sweater she had made for her beloved after she saw him cheating on her, and I thought, oh, that's it. I'm pretty sure Makoto gets stabbed to death in the end, and that must be the murder instrument. She must stab him to death with those, right? And then maybe she goes on a murder spree too. But of course that doesn't happen either. Well, I mean, some of that happens, but she doesn't use the needles. She uses a giant knife she got from... honestly, I have no idea where she got that from. Now, I don't mean to sound like I was disappointed with the real ending, but I will admit, I did expect something slightly different. Although maybe one of my endings is actually in the visual novel. I didn't play it. I kind of don't want School Days to be my first PowerPoint presentation. I'd rather it be something a little more dignified like Fate or Tsukihime, or Sayano Uta. But there is one other thing I should mention about the finale. When it first aired, the finale did not air. Apparently, a real-world murder took place the day before, and it bore a striking similarity to the subject matter. So instead of playing the final episode, they played this. In conclusion, she's mid, but I like her. But now I want to hear from you, the people. How do we feel about School Days? Did I watch it wrong, or did I hit the nail right on the head? Write your essays in the comments, and until next time, Ave Maria, Deus Vult, and a big thank you to all the cultured.